Welcome back. Let's look at international news now on The Full View. Britain will not accept any more people for flights out of Kabul beyond those already inside the airport. This after the country shut its processing centre and entered the final stages of its evacuation from Afghanistan. The British Defence Minister Ben Wallace said Britain is preparing the last 1,000 people inside the airfield who would fly out today as the country winds down its 20-year presence in Afghanistan. After a suicide bombing that killed 85 people, including 13 US soldiers on Thursday, Wallace said the threat from further attacks at the airport would increase as militants seeking to show that they have forced the Western powers out of Afghanistan continue their action. SABC News correspondent Laura Makin-Isherwood joins us now from London. So, Laura, any more news on that blast and whether any British citizens were casualties?
Yes, well, it has now been announced by the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab that 2 British nationals and the child of another British national have lost their lives in that blast in Kabul last night. The Foreign Secretary said yesterday's despicable attack underlines the dangers facing those in Afghanistan and reinforces why we are doing all we can to get people out. We are offering consular support to their families. Of course, we already heard that 13 US military personnel had been killed in that blast. We think around 150 people now are reported to have been injured in it. And as you've said, it really highlights the pressures that people have been under. There was that warning that something like that attack was imminent and could be potentially lethal from a number of countries. That warning was given. And so people were being warned to move away from that airport perimeter in order to try to protect them, but seemingly more people were obviously desperate to get out and so were queuing up outside and got caught up in that blast.
Is there a number that the UK is dealing with? Because as we mentioned earlier on in the introduction, that the Foreign Minister has said that there's a limit to which they'll allow British citizens to be evacuated. So I'd imagine at this point not all of them have been. And do we know how many would be left behind?
Well, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has indicated that there might be sort of 100 to 150 British nationals perhaps still in the country. That's down from a figure of around 400 people that were eligible that was given just a couple of days ago. So people have been coming forward to the airport to get onto those flights. As you've said, the Baron Hotel, which had been used as the processing centre by the Ministry of Defence to get people in the queue, if you like, get their paperwork checked and make sure that they could get onto those evacuation flights, has now closed. The last 1,000 people that are considered eligible are airside, awaiting to get on those flights. It's thought that around 8 or 9 flights as of this morning were still preparing to go out, but there's no confirmation exactly when the last flight will be leaving Kabul. That will be down to a security measure, not trying to cause any further issues around that airport. And of course, we know that British personnel are going to be leaving before that August 31st deadline that is in place, that deal that was brokered between with the Taliban, essentially, where all US troops will have to withdraw from Afghanistan by the 31st of August. British personnel will be leaving before then, but the exact time that the last soldier will be leaving hasn't been given.
And I believe Prime Minister Boris Johnson intends to have a chat with his US counterpart around concerns not to extend the deadline for pulling out of Afghanistan.
Well, yeah, and there's been obviously a G7 meeting, hasn't there, in the last week between leaders. They were trying to work out and try to pressure US President Joe Biden to extend that deadline to allow for, extra hours, extra days to get more people out and ensure that as many citizens from these various Western countries and, of course, those Afghan nationals that were eligible to be evacuated as well could get onto planes. But a lot of the support there is relying on the United States. They have 6,000 military personnel at Kabul airport. The UK has 1,000. And we understand from intelligence experts that it might be that they essentially fold in on one another now. So the UK kind of pull back and then the US are the last kind of bubble of defence. So without that support, there really isn't much else that other nations can do. Boris Johnson has said that he hopes that British nationals will be able to continue to be evacuated from Afghanistan by other means, perhaps by going to third countries. They hope that the Taliban will allow for the safe passage of those people beyond August the 31st. And of course, that is the kind of brokering agreement that the UK and also the G7 are hoping will come to fruition, essentially saying, look, we can give you some sort of aid budget, and the EU has also promised a sort of £1 billion pot will be unfrozen if the Taliban does stick by its promises to allow for women and children to have certain levels of rights and, of course, ensure the safety of other G7 nationals.
Thank you so much for that update, Laura. SABC News correspondent Laura Makin-Isherwood.